This is the Project Dynamix podcast, hosted by Brian Chastain, where he features top leaders in the energy markets to talk about innovation and impact.
Hi, I'm Brian Chastain here, host of the Project Dynamix podcast, where I feature top leaders in the energy markets to talk about innovation and impact. I have Dr. Jeremy Wise here at Rise 25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and we have flipped the script here. He will be interviewing me.
Brian, I am excited because every time we chat, I learn something new, and we're going to dig into some of the things that you've seen, some of the crazy things you've seen. And before we do, this episode is brought to you by Dynamix. And at Dynamix, you make sure companies you work with do not make the news. Okay. I remember you were telling me you read this article of a company that got a $53 million fine, and people do not want that. They do not want to be in the news. They do not want to even get something like that. So basically, if you're in the gas storage, utility services, or energy industry, you are a turnkey project management operation. I know you fix, update, and repurpose assets like wellheads, casing, production tubing, site repair, and replace. You bring clients to and above the industry standards. And Dynamix is an engineering and services group on a mission to help companies achieve peak operational efficiencies with the smallest environmental footprint. You have a team of experts that have been in the field for over 45 years, Brian. So if people want to learn more, they can email info@dynamixesg.com or give you a call at 724-716-4111. So, Brian, I wanted to start off. We're going to talk about some crazy stories, some of the stuff that you and your staff have seen on site, but just talk about, what do people call you for? What are some of the services they ask you to do?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. We get called really to do a number of things. We do on-site evaluations. We get free audit surveys. We'll come out and do things for our clients that are regulated by PHMSA or DOT in general, or any of the normal transmission or industry, any of the industry metrics that people get judged on. The other thing that we get called for is on-site supervision and turnkey operations. We have found that our clients really, they struggle. One of their biggest hurdles has been trying to find that one person or a one call, right? Everybody's like, well, I got to call this guy because he knows this other company. And then they're really good at a piece of the puzzle. Well, we have focused on trying to be good at the puzzle as itself. We work with hundreds of third-party contractors, and we bring them in and we offer a single source where our clients feel confident that they're not going to have to meet new people at every single meeting. They deal with our project manager, they deal with our project engineers, and we get them going. And that's really our claim to fame, is we're just a single source project management turnkey solution for everybody.
Brian, and a lot of times people probably say, hey, can you just come to the site and take a quick picture and give us kind of an overview? Talk about one of those times where you got and there was more that meets the eye.
Yeah, so part of our initial contact with the client, especially if it's a new client or if it's a new location with an existing client, is we like to go out there and kind of see what we're getting into. I mean, a lot of people, or a lot of instances in the past, it has been a blind bid opportunity where they open up the floor and say, okay, anybody wants to throw their hat in the ring, sure, here's the RFP, please go ahead and submit something. But then when they get to location on day one or for the kickoff meeting, they discover that it's not only a much bigger task than what they originally had bid for. There's a lot of things that no one even knew about. In one of those cases where we were sent out to just do regular wellhead cataloging for potential work in the coming years. They knew that there was a chance that we may be doing something for them, but they just didn't know what. So part of their record updating was getting new photos, new CAD drawings, new schematics, new cataloging of the equipment that was on site. And when we got out there and started doing some light digging around the surface valves and stuff, what we discovered was not only did the well need work, we actually had to back up and take some of those photos from a distance. It was to the point where we had to recommend to the client that not only did no one else need to go out there, but it was actually an emergency case. It was completely rusted. One of our employees suggested that you could have potentially just pushed the well over, and they were just asking for a catastrophic event, which, like you said in the intro, this is definitely going to make the news. And this was an active location. They were actively using it during production season, and they were actively making withdrawals and deposits into this well. But no one had caught it because no one went out there to go do the research. What we have found is you get a lot of help that they're not necessarily trained to look for certain things. If you got somebody that's just tying into a line, or he's going out there to go check surface pressures, for instance, well, he's not going to go out there and start digging 4, 5, 6 inches down around where the wellhead meets the surface of the ground. And a lot of times that's where the most deterioration comes from, is you've got multiple elements that you have to worry about there. And for this client, it went from hey, Dynamix, do you think you guys could come out here, do some real quick analysis work for us, do a little cataloging, take some new pictures so we can put it into the well file? And it turned into a middle of the winter absolute emergency. It was nothing will get done until this one gets done. So we were able, because we were already working for the client at that case, not far down the road, we were able to mobilize some of the equipment that we were using for a different project that was wrapping up for the year. We were able to move it over, get onto their well, source all of the equipment, parts, pieces, labor, all of the logistics within a matter of about a week or so, draw up new engineering schematics, get a PE stamps, everything ready to go. And within a couple, probably about a month, that well was back up and running again. It was back in operation, except this time it was safe. It was safe to go to. It was safe to operate with. And surprisingly enough, that's not the only time that we've actually been in that scenario. It's
Brian, what could happen if something like that is not fixed? Okay, let's say a company never called you. They're like, oh, they assumed it was fine. What's the scenario? Like what happened?
I would say that the scenario for something like that, or really anything similar to that, they'll be lucky if it's a $53 million fine. That's one of those where you read about it and you're talking about property damage. In that case, it was farther out into farmland, so you would have had a huge environmental impact if something had gone wrong there. You could have potentially had livestock could have been injured, or their own employees, right? Because it was actively being used. So they could have had just a routine drive-by, my weekly pressure checks or something. And if it was the right day and the right time, that employee possibly could have never went home that day, at least not without some medical attention. And it's really, as much as I would like to say, oh, it's super terrifying, I look at it more as it's an alert. It should be a flag to really anyone. I was reading an article that was talking about 300 wells near the Cleveland area that just they don't even know where all of them are, right? I mean, so you've got wells that are considered orphaned, abandoned. Well, and that's fine, but we've been on orphaned and abandoned jobs that were abandoned, but they still have pressure on them. And so when you've got legacy assets like that, legacy wellheads, legacy inactive or active, there's a reason why you're supposed to go back and check on that stuff, and there's a reason why they're updating the standard to make people go back and plug these things correctly. Because the old version of drop a bag of Saccrete down there, it isn't working, and it's causing some environmental concerns. It's causing leaching. It's causing some fairly serious things. Now, luckily, a lot of these, what we also have found though, Jeremy, is that realistically, we've never had a client that said, no, we don't want to do that, right? Every one of our clients have been extremely proactive once they knew about it. And the reason why I want to talk about it today is because we're finding that a lot of them they just don't know. They don't know because it's not part of their day-to-day inspection. And it's not part of what they would consider a typical analysis. Some of these wells have changed hands, company to company to company. In some cases, a new owner inherits problems that they may not have even been aware of. And so we go out there and we help them take a look, say, this is what you're getting into. This is what you're looking at. This is a potential cost that you're looking at. This is a good timeline. And the timelines right now are a mess. Trying to find a service rig that's not on a wait right now is a serious hurdle for a lot of our clients. Then you got to have the staff to run it and expertise to know what they need to be doing. So
how does it affect, I'm trying to visualize, how does it affect the environment for someone like me who's not sure? You said there's still pressure on these things and it can be an environmental and livestock issue. What does that look like to the environment?
I mean, what it looks like is it depends on what it is. I mean, if you're in a strictly dry gas area, well, then the environmental impact may or may not even be something that you would notice. Okay. The issue at that point would be, let's say that it is under pressure and it's more of a dry gas well and it's just venting gas. Well, to the common individual, it'll never be an issue. To the kid that thinks that he's in an abandoned field and he doesn't have a spark arrestor and he's riding his dirt bike, well, it could be an explosion of some version.
Wow.
Right? I mean, at the very least, it could spark up and flare. If it's not a dry thing, let's say you've got oil and other brine mixtures, all sorts of different things that are supposed to stay in the ground, or at a minimum, they're supposed to stay contained within the casing and the production pipe that was put in place originally. Well, if some of that is damaged or leaking, well, then, I mean, if it's leaking to the surface, in some cases, some of these wells are only getting checked. I mean, if it's an inactive field, it might get checked once every 5 years. I mean, it's not something. So, I mean, just think about it. It doesn't have to be a lot. You're talking about just a little bit of a seeping there that's going back into, and in this case, it was close to agriculture, right? I mean, it was near a farmer's crop, and luckily, it was not leaking. There was no environment impact on that one. We were able to stop it before something happened. But it very easily could have been, I mean, if it's a disposal well or something like that, well, those are put in place to dispose of the excess. Well, you don't want that coming back out. You know what I mean? Like, it's supposed to stay down there for a reason. And because of that, you have to run logs, you have to run surveys, you have to do surface equipment inspections. You have to keep the cataloging up to date. You have to keep your well records up to date. Some of these wells, they don't even know really what it is, because some of the equipment was put in 40s, 50s, 60s. No one that installed that well is around him.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, one small spark or something could set off a whole chain of events in that situation. I could see that.
Yeah.
There's another one, Brian, where someone was asking you just to run a standard log.
Yeah.
Talk
so
about
we
what that means and what happened there.
Yeah. So again, one of our services is we'll go out there and we'll supervise and we'll set up a project to update everybody's records. Well, part of their record keeping process is to log all of these wells, right? So we're running logs and we're trying to figure out the integrity of the well and the downhole equipment. A very common a very common issue is what I just said a minute ago there, is that where the top joint of the casing is right there at the surface, it deteriorates really bad. Okay. We have found that those logs need to be ran under pressure. We have found that those logs can change from year to year. And so there are certain thresholds that are set in place by the regulation, and within our different clients, they have set protocols and thresholds. So we had an incident, potential incident, just a couple about a year ago. Now, when we were with a client and they brought us out and said, hey, we got a batch of wells, come out here, do some surface analysis, run these logs. And they thought they were just going to sign off and be done. So 6 out of those we're on like number 7 and everything's going good. But we get the log back from number 7 and it was really close. Okay. So the threshold in this case was 80% deterioration before it becomes an emergency, meaning you got to plug it in and it has to be fixed. So we get to the 7th one and it was at 72, 75%. So we alerted the client, said, hey, just so you know, this is within your threshold, but it's very close. And we recommended that it needed to get changed. And they said, okay, well, we'll probably just plug that one. Go ahead and do the next one in line. So we get to the next one, we set up and we send it back to get the logs analyzed and everything. And it had been deteriorated so bad that it actually wouldn't read. Okay. Which the equipment is designed to read up to 80%, because that's as far as we can derate the material that's downhole, right? So anything above 80%, we can't, it's a guess at that point. So when we got this one back, the pitting and the erosion to the material, the casing, was so bad that the very expensive equipment would not actually read it. So that turned into another situation where we were able to quickly mobilize. We worked with that client. We were able to work with their environmental team. We were able to immediately dispatch extra supervision, extra equipment. We were able to work with our contractors and our own internal staff who knew which environmental regulatory needed to be notified. And again, not only a very much active well, but we were able to get it plugged, get it repaired, get everything done, actually update the equipment while we were out there. Instead of just logging it and moving on, we went ahead and updated it to a more current setup. And they were ready to go again for their peak draw season. So we were able to get that customer up and running and everything ready to go. Plus, we found several other kind of discrepancies, right? Improper signage. The location wasn't blocked off correctly to where the public couldn't access it. So we were able to get several things taken care of while we were out there.
Wow. Brian, this is crazy. So I'm sure you have many, many crazy stories. People should listen to other episodes of the podcast and check out dynamixesg.com as DYNAMIXESG.com. And Brian, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to the Project Dynamix podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.